So let's get on with it. I mean, the team before us laid the background already. Today is the election day in Ondo State, and people have already come out. They're actually voting already. And we heard, earlier that INEC officials, some of them actually arrived before the scheduled time. So things were set rolling before the time that they were supposed to be, which is a huge surprise to a lot of people, because normally the reports are that INEC officials came late. Materials did not get to the polling stations.
I'm sure we'll still get other reports from other areas, to be able to know that, yes. But for all of those centers that we were in, we could see that the activities had started early, yes.
Yes, so joining us for this segment is my pleasure to welcome the Executive Director, Electoral College Nigeria, Mr. Kunle Lawal.
Morning. It's a pleasure.
We also have a Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Wahab Shitu.
Dr. Wahab Shitu.
I beg your pardon, I'm sorry, Dr. Wahab Shitu.
Yes.
Are you a doctor as well?
No, I'm not.
Okay, all right. And of course, we have Seun Okinbaloye, political editor, and his team, Dare Dowu and Itokwe Kuteyi, who will be joining us from time to time to bring us up to speed regarding what exactly is happening on ground in Ondo State. But let's kick the ball into motion in the studio by talking with our two guests. Dr. Shitu, I saw you watching earlier happenings in Ondo State. What are your thoughts about what you have seen so far? It's still early, yes, we know, but I'm sure you can make some kind of opinion from what you have seen already.
What? You're like some of the comments earlier made in the course of the program. I think it is important that our democracy works and is seen to be working. This is no people filing out to vote. Like you said earlier, and one other commentator has made, it's not the voting in our experience that counts. That is democracy. But what is democracy is the actual counting of the votes. So what am I saying in essence is that we owe it a duty, not only to this generation, but to the incoming generation, to ensure that our elections are credible, free, fair, and peaceful. That is the expectation. We cannot hazard a guess about what is going to happen because it's too early now. The process has just started. But what we can do is to encourage all participants in the process to ensure that the outcome is credible and that the election reflects the will of the Ondo people.
So, Doctor, you said it's the counting that matters.
Yes.
I mean, may I also add, it's not just the counting, it's the announcing of what was counted. Mr. Lawal.
We saw what happened in the US, and that should be, something for us to ponder about. The process seems seamless.
And we didn't see 36,000 policemen.
Yes. And you saw how the loser come out to openly, congratulate the winner.
The winner.
And how the winner was invited subsequently to the White House. And they say they are going to ensure a peaceful transition. That is what we should be looking at in our country.
Okay. Mr.
Democracy
Lawal,
must be seen to be working.
let me start by asking you, what does Electoral College Nigeria do, since we don't have an electoral college system in Nigeria?
Okay, first and foremost, we've existed for 4 years. Our job has been mainly political literacy. We've worked with intra-party democracy. We also work with educating the electorate because we believe that only when an electorate is politically literate can you have a functional democracy? So I'll give an example. Like, most people tend to panic during elections. The truth is that the outcome of elections actually are dictated long before elections occur. And this is not rigging. I'm just trying to state out that if you didn't participate in political party primaries, you can say you'll be less concerned. And if you look at statistics or data in Nigeria, 2015, or let's use the Ondo State since we're talking about Ondo State. Ondo State last election had about total voting population of about 1.4 million. You have produced less than 400,000 votes. Akeredolu won with 228,000 votes. And now you have presidential elections in 2023. Ondo produced about approximately 450,000 votes entirely. So indirectly, what we're saying is the data is already showing, I can say most likely we will not have a voting population in this election, even though you have about 1.75, a little over 1.75 million registered voters. I don't see them having 600,000 voters.
Why? Why do you say that?
Well, apathy and political illiteracy are closely related. And
that means that your organization is not really succeeding, right?
Well, in a country of about approximately 200 million, a little over 200 million. We've only been functional 4 years. I wouldn't say we aren't succeeding. I'll say the task is huge, and I'll say we've been committed to doing exactly what needs to be done. And I know that within the next probably 5 or 6 years, we'll be able to hit the 1 million mark. And right now, our voting has not even produced more than 29 million voters. So 1 million mark is quite a lot of educated voters. And if you get them to participate in the primaries, and instead of just choosing between devil and the blue sea in the elections, then I think we would have scored a very critical point in our democracy. And if we're able to spread that to Africa too, we also would have scored something very strong.
Let's take it to INEC. For this election, and of course all the elections in Nigeria, all eyes are always on INEC. The Edo election just, a couple of months ago. And what lessons, what are some of those things that happened in Edo that INEC didn't do well, that they should not replicate in Ondo?
When we're looking at elections, I feel the biggest problem in elections in Nigeria is coalition. A lot of magic happens during voting, and I'll call it magic because we will say polling agents, like I think even as of now, reports I received just before I came on set was that in some polling units, some polling agents are saying that they should allow what they call it, voters show their ballots after they finish voting or something. There's a fracas over that.
To show the party they voted for?
In a secret ballot?
Yes, it's in a supposedly.
Okay, supposed.
So, it's caused a fracas in a little one or two polling units, which is odd, considering we already have a system that's running. I've wondered, especially those who do a lot of election training and etc., what has been happening in Nigeria, because you seem to train and retrain and train, and they remain untrained. And as regards party polling agents, well, I'll say something about politicians. Every politician is trying to rig an election, whether in America or Nigeria. So if you give them the opportunity to, they will. The game of power is strong. You win by any means necessary. It doesn't take any losers. So if I'm looking at what INEC needs to do, I'll say INEC's manpower needs to be, first of all, I would say, I wouldn't say educated better, I'll say people of impeccable character should be picked. Secondly, INEC needs to understand that when it's going to prepare for an election, it doesn't start its usual knee-jerk responses 1 month before an election, which always collapses into what we have today. And I think it's about time courts stop deciding our elections. That's not a democracy. That's almost moving towards an autocracy.
Dr. Shitu, let's talk about electoral reforms. There's a lot of talk around that. Some people have said BVAS is supposed to be the game changer. but a lot of issues are still surrounding that. What would you say are those areas in our electoral process that we need to strengthen?
Thank you. I think first of all, we have a legal framework for conducting our election. We have the Constitution, we have the Electoral Act. And by virtue of Section 148 of the Electoral Act, INEC is also empowered to make regulations and guidelines. So what I'm saying is that let us follow to the letter regulations and guidelines that we put in place for the conduct of our elections. You will see that most of our electoral laws have been tinkered with repeatedly. So in my view, it is not the absence of laws. We have enough reform initiatives in place. I think what is important is the way to make the reform we have in place to work. Now, for this election, which is an obstacle election, election coming after the general election, there are rules and regulations, there are guidelines put in place by INEC to ensure a smooth sailing exercise. My view is that we should implement these guidelines. If we say we are going to deploy beavers to ensure, seamless accreditation, we should walk the talk. And all who are involved in the electoral process, not only INEC cannot do it alone. The security agents, the law enforcement agents must think in terms of, must prioritize national interest. And how do you prioritize national interest? By ensuring that the rules put in place are enforced. That you do not do anything to manipulate the process. Most elections in Nigeria are marred by manipulation and corruption practices. So as much as possible, particularly at the level of the polling unit, we should ensure that people who are designated presiding officers in the polling units are men and women who are credible people. Because most of the so-called takes place at the polling units.
But Doctor, don't you think that this behavior persists because there are no consequences?
Yes. Of course. Electoral offenses must be prosecuted, documented, and we should ensure that those offenses are prosecuted in order to serve as deterrence. If people can rig with reckless abandon without consequences, if people can perpetrate atrocities, deploy violence, and all kinds of electoral malpractices without consequences, then the culture will continue. What we should do is to ensure that at the end of every election, we should ensure that all the electoral offenses committed, we should identify those who committed those offenses and go out to prosecute them.
Okay, Doctor, yes. Just hold your thoughts there. We have our correspondent, Dare Dowu, joining us from Ondo State. Dare, give us an update on where you are and what the situation is.
Thank you very much. It's been a long journey here. We traveled from Akure this morning, about 3 hours, to this particular spot. It's called Kiribo Eseodo. I was standing at this exact spot 4 years ago because I covered this particular local government as well. So one thing that you would realize as you journey through the very, very thick forest is every point, every strategic location is manned by the military. So I was talking to the driver. He said something about the fact that maybe because it's the coastal community, the riverine area, and maybe one of the places marked as hotspot, but very heavy presence, and we had our fair share of being stopped and searched, and eventually were allowed to go, despite the fact that we had all the tags and the sticker. They still stopped us every step of the way. So now we're here. This is Unit 4, Ward 002, and 8:30 polls open here. And the vote process was on the way, and it's been quite smooth, so to say. But one thing we've also noticed is the fact that this particular unit, or maybe the local government, has a lot of aged or old voters, and some of them have been helped out. Like the person voting at the moment is being helped out by an official. So that is quite prevalent around here. You see a lot of that because they're quite old and they needed help. So like I said, it's been going on quite well. It's been a smooth process according to so. And I also have someone who will be joining me. He's one of the people that I also spotted earlier because he's a young boy.
Okay, good morning. My name is Victor Adiri.
Hello, Dare. Okay, I guess technology is coming into the discussion. I'm sure we'll get back to you at some point, but Doctor, you were making the point around electoral reforms.
The essence of what I was saying is that we need a change in attitude in our chemistry. Our attitude. It is not the laws, it's not the reform. A change of attitude is what is required for us to get the kind of improvement that we all desire. We must be prepared as a nation, as a people, to change, to reflect a positive attitude towards the conduct of elections.
Okay, change in attitude.
Change in attitude.
Yes, I was looking at Mr. Lawal as you were saying that, and I was thinking to myself, Mr. Lawal, the organization has its work cut out.
Yes,
what are you going to do in that regard?
Yes, it does. Like, if I'm to give an example with the 2023 elections, I'll clearly state that we come from a different perspective. Like I said earlier, most elections are rigged or are corrupted before the election day happens. So I'll give an example. The Electoral Act clearly states that every party must, before any national convention or primaries, must submit to INEC with its list of registered members, soft, that's electronic copy, and hard copy. None of the 18 political parties did this. So this indirectly states, if you're following the Electoral Act, that none of the parties should have a convention or primaries, which indirectly means any primaries or convention carried out in 2033 is null and void.
So that happened, but INEC was okay with it.
Beautiful. So we've created, there's what our laws agree with. That's the Electoral Act, which guides all the elections. That's what our laws. Then we Nigerians have created a culture, and the culture is, of course, defined as a way of life. So we've created a culture of politics that totally, I don't know, the rules change. The rules change every elections. And the amount of currency changes. You know, there was a time in Nigeria we're using Naira. So 2023 we moved to dollars. We might do pounds in 2027. We don't know yet, but it's headed somewhere. So for me, when you look at the general perspective, I feel Nigerians want a good government. Nigerians want a transparent election. But they have mortgaged the responsibilities totally, including INEC itself, to CSOs, to activists. And I'll say something. Not every CSO is right sometimes. It's normally from an emotional perspective. Not every activist is right. Or let me even put it better. 85% of activists aren't right. And in the end, you have a chaos of what's supposed to be a democracy. And when you look at it that way, imagine this is a country where courts decide elections. Number one, that's an anomaly. That is not even supposed to happen. But I think it started sometime at Amichi's time, former Governor Amichi of Rivers State. And since then, it's a myriad of off-cycle elections, which are not even supposed to be, and etc. So if we were to go back and rewrite the script, let's not talk about the problems. The first thing, which is what the organization I work for states, is we first need Nigerians to first understand what exactly democracy or what exactly politics is. And from there, you can now navigate or move forward. Like, averagely, if you were a candidate here, everybody will assume you should spend money in the room. There are limits to every candidate spending money, but those campaign limits are there. And the electoral, I think the wisdom of the National Assembly, it is state who prosecutes what, and I'm sure San agrees with it. Nobody is stated to prosecute this. And here's the funny quagmire. Political parties are okay with, let's say, to run for local government chairman is 25 million, which is campaign limit. And then the political parties are okay with giving you a form for local government chairman at 10 million. And because we do not know, we do not care. If you spend 10 million at your form, how much are you going to spend on your campaigns? And it goes as crazy as even INEC, that's supposed to be the regulator, allowing people to have multiple primaries. How do you have multiple primaries when you have a clear-cut state? You know who's in charge of Ondo State, you know, yet you're having multiple primaries, and INEC was at all these primaries. You know, nobody asks these questions, and therein lies the problem with our democracy. So we've created a culture of democracy in Nigeria, which totally has left the Electoral Act and the Constitution way far behind. And that's the problem.
Dare is in Kiribo Eseldo, and he was sharing his experience on their way getting to that area. And just as other correspondents also mentioned, a lot of security operatives on the road. The police said they deployed over 30,000. Over
36,000.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So, and then also the NSCDC. How is this? Yes, we know security is very important, but is it affecting in a way the turnout of people for the election, or could it affect it?
I'd like to answer this question this way. I'll use an analogy. You build a house. You install the latest security gadgets, and then the house does not have a roof and doesn't have windows and a door. And you expect security, or you expect a secure elections, or you expect, it doesn't make sense. So it's always a knee-jerk approach with our elections. I do not see how massive security has ever helped Nigerian elections. We still have crisis of people trying to alter votes. We still have misdemeanors in
box snatching.
Yes, there's not been anything different. And so for me, I feel we waste a lot of resources. I believe those resources will be best, guarding places that have security issues. The problem is never, and we need to understand this in Nigeria, the problem, as we've seen in Nigerian elections, is never the product. It is the process. If the process is rigged from beginning, you do not follow laws, you are removing this candidate at so time because the party's primaries weren't followed, or whatever rules and regulations according to the Electoral Act weren't followed, you're not going to have a good election. So you can't plant cassava and reap rice. It doesn't work that way. And we keep making these mistakes year in, year out, election in election.
Okay. Doctor, the long and short of what Mr. Lawal has said is that the people are not immersed in the process. They don't even know what questions to ask. Some of them don't even know what to do. They don't know what the electoral laws say. How do you think that we can get to the stage where the people actually know exactly what they're supposed to do? they're asking the right questions, so that any politician who steps a foot wrong will be called to order by the people who are the ones who actually are holding the power to put somebody there or not.
Well, that underscores the essence of political education. Political education must be intensified. Like you mentioned, a lot of people are ignorant about the process. If you look at our own brand of democracy, the way it is, are we practicing democracy the way we ought to practice democracy? First of all, look at, he mentioned the issue of monetization of the process. What we have in place, in my view, is more of cash and carry democracy. And the political elite, they are capitalizing seriously on the poverty of our people. If the reality of our circumstances today, and this is not blaming any particular government, I blame successive governments. They have so far succeeded in improvising Nigeria. I mean, making Nigerians raising the stakes of poverty in our country. Majority of Nigerians live below the poverty line. There's a lot of poverty in our country today, and we must address this. When you have pervasiveness of poverty, ignorance in a country like this, in spite of our potential, in spite of the resources that we have, then when elections come, people see it as an opportunity to take a bite at the cherry. They see it as an opportunity not to elect leaders that will truly reflect the will of the people. I mean, but the highest bidder, who's ready to meet my immediate needs, who's willing to offer me the kind of resources that will enable me to take care of my pressing needs. If you offer,
2,000 naira, 5,000
if you offer, then I'm prepared to vote for. So we need to ensure through political education that we reduce the phenomenon of this cash and carry democracy.
Yeah, but
much more frightening. Sorry.
Doctor, as long as we remain this poor, you can't blame those who go out there just because they're going to collect 2,000 naira. 2,000 naira has suddenly become a lot of money to a lot of people.
I agree with you. That is why I said civil society organizations, NGOs, even the National Orientation Agency, some of the agents, we must prioritize political education. Political awareness. We must sensitize our people. So that if somebody comes around and then pay his way into elective office, the first thing he will do is how to recoup his investment, not necessarily to serve. We should make people aware that politics is about service. Politics is about service. And that if you want to serve, you don't have to rig yourself. It shouldn't be a do or die affair. And that the period of the that the ballot box is the weapon available to the voter to be able to ensure good governance is delivered. We must, that ballot box, that ballot paper, the vote that you have is your strength against bad governance. The vote that you have is your strength of calling upon the government to be accountable. The strength of your vote must be emphasized. And most people don't even understand the power they have by virtue of the choice they can exercise through voting. So, and this can only be, we can only correct this narrative if we emphasize political education, political education, political education.
Okay. Just before we go, okay.
Our time is completely up.
Yes, I just wanted to speak to Mr. Lawal to perhaps speak to some of the Ondo people who are at home and thinking this process will not
affects my life.
This process will not count. What would you say to them, for those people who are skeptical about this process?
If I had this opportunity, first thing I'll say is, if you don't engage politics, politics will engage you. Fuel prices, dollar prices. And if you think the dollar doesn't affect you, ask yourself how much you bought rice last Christmas. Political illiteracy has hurt Nigeria in ways we do not even imagine. Imagine we discuss constituency projects. They are totally unconstitutional, and we know it, and we discuss it. When last did we ask any House of Rep what bills, or senator in National State House of Assembly? And let's be honest, what are councillors? They are the legislative house of the local government. When last did we ask them what laws they put forward? These are the questions we need to ask ourselves, Ondo and Nigeria.
So in other words, it is not in the interest of the politician for Nigerians to be politically aware. So they're quite happy for us to be ignorant.
Exactly. Now, you understand
Over
the problem.
to you and organizations like yours to give us this education. Mr. Kunle Lawal, Executive Director, Electoral College, Nigeria, and Dr. Wahab Shitu, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, who joined us in the studio. It's a pity we couldn't get much from Dari, but as the program continues, we will still be touching base with Ondo so that we can be giving you blow-by-blow accounts of things that are happening in Ondo State. And the team is led by our own Sheung Okimbaloye. Thank you for being with us. Sunrise will return in just a moment. Stay with us.